there's always a fiddler in every Irish family. The eldest son tills the land, he's the head of the family. The second goes down to the ships and sails the 7 seas. The third is the white-headed boy, and he's mother's darling, for he's the most delicate. He's studious and becomes a priest. The fourth is the black sheep. A blind man teaches him the fiddle, so off he goes gallivanting from fair to fair in the countryside. His father knows well he'll come to little good, and so he throws him out of the house, the back of his head. And so the boy roves to the world with his fiddle in a green baize bag, with the bow sticking out. And you will meet him in Chicago, San Francisco, or even Carbondale, Pennsylvania, and hear him play the Song of the Wheelwright. A magic song. I'd like to play it for you now. No matter how great a black sheep he may have been, his sisters will never let a day pass without saying a prayer for him, and his mother knows that one night he'll knock at the door, and so she keeps his chair ready for him by the kitchen fire. And talking about the kitchen fire reminds me that the earliest tune that I remember in my life was when I was a child and an old fiddler played what was called the Banshee's Wailing. Well, when I was young, I played in many fairs in the countryside of Donegal and County Cork, and I used to go around with blind men and tinkers. Indeed, I'll never forget the day when one of those tinkers called Coffee put a tinker's curse on me. And I was rather afraid of it until I met one of the rival tinkers called Byrne, and he gave me a special tune which he said was an antidote. And you know, that tune has stuck in my mind ever since. When I was 14 years of age, I was sent to school in England at Shrewsbury in Shropshire. And although I was kept busy in school, I met gypsies from time to time from the tribe of Cooper in the lanes of Shropshire. And from them I learnt a very famous gypsy song, Off with the Raggle Taggle Gypsies. And that song became my signature tune, and all my life I've had it with me all over the world. It's a song with a lilt, as well as a romantic story. It tells of the elopement in the 17th century of the young Countess of Cassilis with the gypsy chief Johnny Farr. He came with his tribe to the castle, and one day he played outside her window, and she left her husband and her children, and she went off with him. And then afterwards the Lord followed, and he followed with all his men, and those gypsies were all captured, and 15 of them were hanged. And as the poem says, and we were 15 well-made men, although we were nae bonny, and we were a' put down for one, a fair young wanton lady. And the tune of that song is as follows. It's about 300 years old, and you can tell that by it being the Aeolian mode. My next gypsy adventures came in January 1919. At the end of the First World War, I was on the Italian front with the British Expeditionary Forces, and we were up in the Venetian province. And one day, that January 1919, I was giving a concert in a YMCA hut for troops. And at the end, 5 Austrian prisoners who were working for us came up and they asked to see my fiddle. I could see they were not a bit like Austrians. They were mahogany colour. I saw they were gypsies. And they asked to see my fiddle. They said, "Do let us see the fiddle. We cannot live without playing a fiddle, for we are Hungarian gypsies. Do get us some wood and some strings." So I got them some old packing cases, and I got them some strings and hair for the bow. And about 2 months later, when I came through that village, they'd made fiddles out of the white packing cases, and they'd also got strings and the bow, and they were playing like mad. And they were playing so wildly that the colonel said to me, well, he said, we have to use these people for dancing, because they make the people dance in spite of themselves. There you get the secret of the gypsy. I got to know these 5 gypsies very well. So well, in fact, that I even did the brother ceremony with one of them. And I made a promise which I forgot about. But curiously enough, though I forgot all about that gypsy, my blood brother, I forgot also many of the tunes, but 10 years later, I suddenly then remembered my vow, and I set out for Hungary. Now, one of the tunes he told me was the tune of the violin, and the birth of the violin, a strange legend that they tell in Transylvania of the origin of the violin. And I'd just like to tell you and play you the tune. This story was about a village in Transylvania, and there lived in that village a very beautiful girl called Mara. And this girl was very beautiful, but the people in the village thought she was bewitched, because though she was beautiful, no man would ask her in marriage. And in spite of her being beautiful, and her rich dowry, and she herself was in love with a farmer, but he paid no attention to her. So she did a very wicked thing. She prayed to the devil. The devil then appeared, and he said to her, if you give me your mother and your father and your 4 brothers, I'll enable that man to fall in love with you. So she gave them. And out of the father, the devil made the body of an instrument. Out of the white hair of the mother, he made the white hair of the bow. Out of the 4 brothers, he made the 4 strings. And then he handed this instrument to her, and he said, you play that instrument, and the young man will follow you. So she played, and the young man did follow her. And they were going off arm in arm very happily, when suddenly the devil appeared, and he said, now, on the other hand, you belong to me, because you played the devil's instrument. And so you'll have to come off to hell with me. So off they went with the devil to hell, and the instrument and the bow lay on the ground in the forest, and it lay there till an old gypsy came through the forest, and he found it, and he began to play it, and he's been playing it ever since, and that's why the fiddle is called the devil's instrument. Now there's the story. Now this is the tune this man played for me. 10 years after that scene on the military front in North Italy, I set out for Hungary in July 1929. In Hungary at Lake Balaton, I made the acquaintance of some gypsy tribes, and I learned from them Hungarian tunes, and I went from fair to fair with them, earning my living with them. Or you might say that I earned for them. We used to descend on a village when there was a fair on at about 5 o'clock in the morning, and there we'd wait until about 10 or 11 o'clock, when the peasant had sold his calf or his bull, and instead of going home with the money, he would always go to a caveas or cafe with either his wife or his best girl, and there he would sit, and the leader of the gypsies would come up and play to his face. And he would play always to try and bring out of that peasant the tunes that he wanted to sing. And the peasant would start off singing very sad songs. And the gypsy would accompany him, exciting him all the more. And he'd excite him, and then you would find the peasant singing. And sometimes he'd weep, because the music is all very sad. There's music about Hungarian history. And all the gypsy would go on playing this rhapsody, this sad music. And then they'd go on singing. Then after a while, the gypsy would make it more rhythmic. And you'd find them beginning to stamp in time with the rhythm. And then the gypsy would make it snappy. And then you get what was called the shardash, the beginning of the shardash, the dance of the sharda, or the tavern. And first of all, you got the lasso shardash, this slow, rhythmic stamping tune. And then finally, the gypsy works them up gradually and gradually until it becomes more and more exciting. And when they rise to the height of excitement, then everybody gets up in the cafe and they begin to dance the real shardash, that very virile dance that the Hungarians perform. And so the gypsy goes on playing faster and faster, making them more and more excited. And then suddenly, when everybody's very excited, he breaks off suddenly, and then he goes back again to the sad tune. And so again that produces the calm, and the people go back to their seats, and then the people then pull out the money, and they begin to give it to the gypsy. That's how the gypsy makes his money, and you see how it comes in a kind of romantic, a kind of adventure of music that even the peasant has. And the curious thing is that in the morning, the Hungarian peasant despises the gypsy, looks upon him as a pariah, and he despises him because he says he doesn't work the land. But in the evening, or after he has finished the fair, and when he needs this romance or the music coming into his life, then you'll see him put his arm around the gypsy and give him all the money he has and toast him, and in such a way does the music develop. And then there's a word in Hungarian language for that, the word mulatni, which means to enjoy yourself with gypsies. And that means to have the adventure of music. And that's why they have a proverb in Hungarian which says, give a Hungarian peasant a glass of water and a gypsy, and he becomes completely drunk on rhythm. And so to show you that, I'll play you two of these gypsy rhapsodies. The first one is a short one, which I got from my friend, the gypsy fiddler in Italy, the Hungarian. And then I'll play you after that another, more romantic one, and another contrasting one to show you how that music develops. Journey went on through Hungary, I came then beyond the frontier into Transylvania, the land beyond the forest as it's called. And there you find three races, the Hungarians, the Magyars, the Romanians, and the Saxons. And when I went into Transylvania in '29, I passed through the villages. So I really met these gypsies and peasantry. The gypsies whom Cervantes calls the kings of nature, the kings of the fields and prairies, the forests, the mountains, the springs. For their steel limbs, the hard ground is as soft as eider down. These gypsies, I met them living out in tents in their tribes. And I remember on one morning, when I was out early in the morning, trudging along, carrying my fiddle, I came across a blind fiddler. He was dressed in ragged white baggy trousers and a short green coat, with no hat, and he was playing to himself, seated on a hillock. And at the end of every verse of this song that he played to himself, he used to recite aloud a Latin prayer with utmost devotion before he began the next verse. He was totally blind, and there he was alone, playing this music. And I asked him, we became friends. And I said, what is that tune you're playing? And he said, well, that's a tune, an old tune, and it's a dialogue between myself and my spirit. And I play you this tune because it's a very beautiful one, and one that's so characteristic of the Romanian gypsy music. One of my most exciting adventures was with a Hungarian gypsy girl called Anna. I met her at Lake Balaton, a little place and village, and she interested herself in me, in my playing, I thought at first. And I found also that she was very indiscreet in certain ways. And also she made several scenes with me in restaurants and cafes. And I was perturbed because she attracted a great deal of attention. But of course Hungary, unlike Northern Europe, it's a delightfully discreet place, and scenes of passion break out very often in restaurants, but nobody pays any attention. And she was very changeable. Well, anyhow, she interested herself with me, and we danced, and she taught me the Shardash, and we danced the Shardash. And afterwards she said to me, I wanted to go to bed because I was tired, but Anna insisted I should accompany her back to her room. Come now, you promised me. My husband's not here. I have a bottle of palinka, brandy. Being of a weak nature, thinking it uncavalier to refuse a lady, I went to her lodgings. She lived on the first floor of a small house, poorly furnished but tidy, and we were let in by a villainous-looking old hag, who must have belonged to the 1417 band of gypsies. The furniture was poor, but in compensation the walls were hung with embroideries. I do not like palinka the best of times, for it tastes like very rough brandy, but Anna's spirit was as bad as Irish poteen. After a few glasses I felt as if I'd been drugged. And I was becoming rather apathetic. But she seemed to increase in vivacity, and she began to taunt me for being so sleepy and dull. Ah, you North Europeans, alcohol sends you to sleep when you should be passionate lovers. At that moment I was feeling the exact antithesis. I had been thrilled by too many emotions in that day of mulapne and shardash. I was jaded. And in the back of my mind I watched myself coldly and critically. Then Anna said, I shall dance for you. And she started to undress with rapidity. A blue and yellow muslin frock, a petticoat, so I slipped off as though somebody had pulled aside a curtain. And my impulse was to turn away. But in her nakedness she advanced towards me and started to dance, humming a tune at the same time. I bethought me my violin, which I had left in the corner of the room. So I seized it and started to play a Hungarian gypsy rhapsody. On she danced, as I played. Now I felt secure, for as I played, my thoughts and emotions all centered in the music, and her white body became a distant figure, like a Tanagra statuette set on a pedestal at the end of a shadowy hall. The music, too, seemed to sublimate her dancing, take away all traces of self-consciousness. She was the model, and I was the painter, for why should one not paint in sound as well as in colour? She became the eternal gypsy, with reminiscences of Russia, of Spain, of Hungary, in her movements as she passed from the slow improvisation to the presto finale. Who knows how long we should have continued this performance if suddenly we'd not heard a knock on the outside door. Anna gave a gasp and stood still, listening intently. The old woman crept noiselessly into the room and whispered in her ear, and Anna turned to me excitedly. "It's my husband. I thought he was at Budapest. What shall I do? Quick, get away from here." I felt to my dazed mind all the sensations of the rat caught in a trap, but not for long, for the old woman pushed me into another room and pointed to a window, and grasping my fiddle case, I climbed onto the edge and found that luckily there was not much of a drop to the ground. As I stood there, I had a last fleeting vision of Anna amid a cloud of frills and flounces, and then I jumped down into the street. As I hurried back to my lodgings by devious routes, I mentally thanked Anna's husband for his consideration in knocking at the door of his own house. If he'd followed the English husband's plan and carried a latchkey, the law of husbands would have claimed another victim. Next morning I remembered with considerable trepidation what happened to the second calendar in the Arabian Nights, when the genie brought back the objects he'd forgotten in the prince's apartment, and I half expected to see Anna's husband appear in my room, carrying some incriminating handkerchief or button which I'd forgotten. So I thought it best to leave that village for Budapest, and I've not seen Anna since. These were the tunes that I played.